Welcome to another podcast from the Peter Wall Institute for Advanced Studies at UBC. For more information on our programs, visit pwias.ubc.ca.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome one and all to our first Singer Behind the Song for this season. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Nancy Hermiston, and I'm head of Voice and Opera divisions here at UBC. And today we have such a great pleasure to have our alum, Mr. Ben Heppner here, Dr. Ben Heppner. He's an honorary degree recipient from UBC as well. And we're just thrilled to have him back here. And we're going to hear more from him very shortly. But first, I want to introduce our new director of the Peter Wall Institute, Dr. Philippe Tortel, and have him say a few words of greeting. We're so delighted that he is in this position, and we're very fortunate to have him.
Thank you very much, Nancy. I'd like to add my voice to welcome all of our visitors and our distinguished guests here to what will certainly be a wonderful evening. I would like to begin, however, by stating that we are currently on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Musqueam people, who have passed on their culture and their tradition in the place that we stand for many generations. UBC is very fortunate to have a strong relationship with the Musqueam Band, and we are delighted and very fortunate to have this magnificent campus on their traditional territories. For those of you who don't know, this is the 25th anniversary of the Peter Wall Institute for Advanced Studies. And the Institute is a very, very special place, both here at UBC and also in the world at large. It is a community of scholars at UBC that are joined by international scholars from around the world. And it is a place where we have the right to play with ideas. We have the right to explore innovative and fascinating directions in all disciplines of human scholarship, and we take intellectual chances and we try hard to break new ground on the edge of thoughts. And an important aspect of our mission is to engage with public audiences, to bring these ideas that come from our scholarship, to tell stories and to motivate discussion at all levels of discourse. And another thing that we hold dear here at the Institute is to explore alternative modes or media of communicating these ideas. And of course, one of the most powerful, is through the performing and the expressive arts. And for this reason, we've always valued our partnerships with all of the wonderful artists and performers that we have on campus, like Nancy and their wonderful group at the School of Opera, or the Division of Voice, I should say, in the School of Music. And as you all know, because you're here, opera is such a powerful way to tell stories and for us to imagine as humans these powerful narratives that we deal with on a day-to-day basis. So I'm delighted to welcome Nancy and Dr. Heppner and the rest of the ensemble here, and I'm sure that you'll enjoy this wonderful occasion. I'd like to remind you that there are light receptions at the end, so we hope that you can stay for some informal chat and conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So, today we're talking about larger voices, right? And Ben has his own title, which I'll let him introduce for this workshop. But we happen to have a lot of young singers who have larger voices. And one of the troubles for larger voices is that they have to wait until that voice is ready to sing what it was meant to sing. And sometimes people try to make those larger voices sing things that are too small for them, and that can be as bad as singing something too big for them.
Don't take my stuff away from me here. I've got stuff to say, you know.
So I don't have a large voice, so I'm going to turn it over to somebody who does, and that's our star, Mr. Ben Heppner.
Thank you, Nancy. I've been in this room. In fact, there's a couple of things that came to my mind here. Sorry, we're very. It's okay. It's not you. It's not you. It's me. There are two things. One was I was doing a recital at the UBC Recital Hall as a young professional, and I was in this very room where there was a dinner being served. And one of the professors at UBC, I think at the time, I probably shouldn't say his name, a professor of piano. Anyway, so I'm before the concert. I'm a little nervous. This is alma mater. This is, it's kind of, Ben's return, and I was feeling the pressure. So in the middle of it, he sort of leans into me right close into my personal space and says, "So are you nervous?" So I'm not going to ask any of the students up who are waiting here. Of course they're nervous a little bit, but that's okay because it's part of the job. Now the other thing that I recalled was just down there. This used to be the faculty club at the university, and so our wedding reception was just down there, and was sponsored by a piano professor by the name of Phyllis Schultz. So that's where we had it. And then there was the tradition back then that you would be in your wedding dress and your tuxedo, and at a certain point you disappear for 20 minutes and change into your going away outfit. Well, when I was taken up to take a look on the second floor and this beautiful view over the bay and everything else, I'm sorry, Dr. Brett, I've forgotten your last name. Finley. Dr. Finley takes me up and shows me his office, and I came there and I went, I know this. This is where we changed. It's hard to believe. Anyway, if you don't forget something like that, Anyway, it's great to be back, what can I say? So I've decided to call this How to Train Your Dragon, because that's kind of how it feels. I got lots of looks from various choir directors, because you can, if you open it up, you open up your voice, you can absolutely obliterate the whole tenor section, and it only becomes your sound. And apparently that's not good. I earned titles like Leather Lungs or Thunder Lungs. And although I had the ability to sing in kind of it's what's called voix mixte, in a mixed voice. So it's kind of a falsetto, it's a lighter way. It's probably the way most pop singers will sing. And I could go up to the top end of my voice with no trouble at all. And if I went from here, you wouldn't even hear it because it was small and didn't have any carrying ability. But there was a big pressure on me to, as Nancy said, is to sing smaller. And that's not good. I loved singing in choirs, and I did a lot of it, even at a professional level. But it was hard. I had to learn how to kind of get my voice in control, and it felt like I was always kind of fighting with it to make it do that. And it took a while finally, so I could break free and start to really, really sing. And that's every voice here has sort of experienced that. They've had people go, it's disturbing us, and at this point in their lives, as they're in their training, it's a problem because not all of us are Mozart singers. In fact, Mozart may be just the wrong thing to be singing for you because it takes such control. And there's also other Baroque things or whatever might be almost damaging. But I've heard all the singers that are going to be singing today. We've got an amazing array of people. So I think the first thing is who's off, who's on deck right now? Mariah. Okay. Mariah?
Mariah, but with the handle.
Yes. Mariah with the handle.
Right.
All right, Mariah with the handle. Bring it on.
Oh, her on. Let her fall, let her fall. Fall, fall. Rolling down the depths of night. Nevermore to behold the light. If I the imperial scepter sway, I swear by hell. Tremble, 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 thou universe, this oath to hear. Not one of Custer Jane was raised to spare. Hence, hence, Iris, hence away. Iris, hence away, 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 away. For from the realms of day, for from the realms of day, for from the realms, for from the realms of day. O'er Scythian hills to the May Ocean Lake, o'er Scythian hills to the May Ocean Lake, a speedy flight we'll take. Hence, Iris, hence away, Iris, hence away, 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 a speedy flight we'll take, a speedy flight we'll take, a speedy flight we'll take, a speedy flight, a speedy flight we'll take. Their song was I'll compel his downy bed to leave and silence cell. With noise and light, with noise and light, I will his peace molest. Nor shall he sing again to pleasing rest, till to my vowed revenge he grants supplies and seals with sleep the wakeful dragon's eyes. Hence, hence, Iris, hence away. Iris, hence away, 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 for from the realms of day, for from the realms of day, for from the realms, for from the realms of day. O'er Scythian hills to the May Ocean Lake, o'er Scythian hills to the May Ocean Lake, a speedy flight we'll take. Hence, Iris, hence away, Iris, hence away, 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 a speedy flight we'll take, a speedy flight we'll take, a speedy flight we'll take, a speedy flight, a speedy flight we'll take.
Each of these arias that are listed, the students have worked with Ben in the last 2 days. So Monday and Tuesday, they had individual coachings with him. And so then we chose these arias after we had worked with Ben. So we put them both down on the program so you'd know what we were working on. And then after working, they chose which ones they would sing. So now we're going to hear Callie Clayton with one from Bohem.
One of the things that I talk about a lot, probably sounded like a broken record to the people the students, is breath. And I talk about it in terms of like faster air, not more air, but sort of moving the air quicker. Because the tendency, and somehow I don't know whether we as human beings do it this way naturally, but we tend to kind of starve the airflow. And it just doesn't suit itself to letting the voice flow, and particularly for a bigger voice, well, it needs more breath to float on it, and so when not doing the compressing thing, so that seems to be, I don't know whether we do that naturally or whether we are taught that way a little bit, but to get more air. The whole vocal cord will vibrate in a lower note. But then as you get higher, it sort of shortens up. And in essence, it doesn't take as much air. But if you don't commit yourself to kind of a cushion, kind of a hovercraft approach to getting this thing lifted, it's not going to happen. And I was just blown away with the first two. Mariah is, wow. A big voice doesn't generally move very quickly, so congratulations. And Callie, this just started, you were getting the whole idea of getting it floating and just on the air, so it can carry and it has all the warmth and richness. Who do we have next, Nancy?
We have Scott
Scott is going to do Lenski's aria, Kuda, Kuda.
He's doing this in Russian, and we will be doing this opera in February, first week of February. And so the students are learning Russian, and as you know, singers have to sing in all these original languages. And that's the great thing about surtitles, is that we can sing in the original languages, and you get the benefit of having it translated in your language, whatever that is, whatever country you're in. And so that's a great thing. But also, I'm sure Ben's going to talk about this later too, with these big voices, they have to contend with big orchestras. So that's also a thing about the air and about all kinds of focus. And so we'll probably address that later. And this is one of these operas that does have a large orchestra, the Eugene Onegin from Tchaikovsky. And so we're delighted that Scott will be singing this aria from Lenski now.
Печальной жизни бурной, ах, Ольга, specialni, gisli burnai, ach, Olga, ja тебя любил. Serdeczny druk, żelany druk, приди, приди, желанный друг, приди, я твой супруг, приди, я твой супруг, приди, приди. Я жду тебя, желанный друг. Приди, приди, я твой супруг. Куда вы удалились, золотые дни моей весны?
We have one Wagnerian number that we're going to do right now, Dich Teure Halle. But Amira is also going to be one of the leading ladies in the console, and I hope that you'll all come and visit that. I also want to tell you that we have a fantastic symposium. You have this card. There have been some changes of speakers, one of whom is Tima Curdy. You may have heard of her. Her nephew was the little boy that we saw on television who died on the shores of the at that time, and caused a lot of action with trying to rescue these people. And so we have a symposium of very fascinating people, and there'll be more news about it. And Amira is going to be Magda, who is the leading lady for that. And she has also worked with Ben on that role. And but now we're going to hear her in one of her party pieces, Dich Teure Halle.
Geliebte Raum,
that's the kind of voice you need to get over an orchestra. And it's not just about being sort of loud. There's a point to it, and so it's not just like kind of big, and particularly not necessarily big to the singer. That's the one thing you have to realize is you're not. It's all the stuff inside here needs to get out. So if a voice sounds really big here, it might not sound that big back there. And that means it needs a little bit of help. There's this Italian word called squillo. And it's not to do with the mouse. There's that buzz. It's that buzz on the voice. And actually, I have to say, all the singers here have got that, and it's just able to carry over an orchestra. And it's something that you have to learn to trust. I noticed that, and I remember an early review from in Toronto, and the reviewer said that Mr. Heppner may have a career if he learns to sing softly. I confronted him about 20 years later and said, he said, yeah, we get wrong sometimes. But because it's not that singing with a really, sort of an intense tone, it's not always loud. It can also be a very sensitive sound. And you can, it's not, the big voice doesn't sound as soft as maybe a slightly smaller voice, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't feel soft, doesn't feel piano. I had a little interview with Judith Forrest yesterday, and we were discussing about, I said the worst insult that my teacher had was, ew, the tenor's getting artistical. Which meant that I was trying to finesse and I was trying to be very musical, and it's just say, no, sing. And then all that stuff will come out, but it will come out more freely, it will flow, and it just kind of flows out of you. You don't make it happen. That's the thing. You don't make it happen, like specifically contributing everything. You allow it to happen. You get the space and all the little details kind of organized, but they're kind of away from your voice. And then you use your voice to sort of play a little bit. And you'll maybe get a dozen performances in your life when you are in this position, and all of a sudden you realize, hey, whatever I want to do, I can do. Sometimes it doesn't happen that way. It's not that it's bad, it's just that sometimes it's freer and more easy than others. And it's just so wonderful to let that float and just play with the music and be part of the orchestra. With Wagner, you're kind of part of the orchestral colors. And you're kind of almost buried in the middle of all of these big orchestras. There's like 80 people sawing away trying to prevent you from being heard, so you've got to work hard. But with Verdi, your voice is a little more front and center, and he kind of sets, and you've got to flow down in front of that, and that is hard. I have to say, I think Wagner was easier in that sense because I could almost lean against an orchestra, whereas the other Verdi voices, even Mozart, maybe they're more in front of it. And anyway, it's the joy of a career. I quite frankly don't want to hear myself talk anymore. I do want to hear somebody else sing, though.
I just wanted to ask you a question. I think sometimes teachers are afraid of big voices, like to teach big voices, because it is different. And what do you think about that?
I was fortunate never to have that happen. I worked with French Tickner here, and Judith did as well. And I think I heard you say he scared the high notes into you. Is that what I heard? He never got that far with me, but it happened later. He scared me, but just not the high notes. So I had teachers who were more comfortable with a bigger voice, but there were a number of times I remember auditioning for somebody, and I'm in a room, you know, the size of this platform, and maybe double the size of the platform, and he's playing piano, and I start singing. I know it was something, a Mozart piece, Dies Bildnis ist bezaubernd schön, something like that, and it was immediate. Oh, shh, less. And I thought, oh well, as soon as I do that, it means that my voice is constricted, and I'm going to start, you know, I'm going to sound. Yeah, it's going to sound tighter and that. So there are some times that voices aren't allowed to like open it up. And kudos to you here, Nancy, that you recognize that, and that it takes a little bit more time to have a voice expanded, because you have to learn to drive this thing. You have to train it, train the dragon, right? That you recognize it here, and allow that to happen. It just takes time, and it's kind of frustrating to think that my career didn't really begin in a major way until I was 32. Took a while to finally settle in, you know, and so I think people are starting now to figure out that everybody's an individual, and they need to be treated
Right.
with what kind of voice they have.
And then you have roles that Ben would sing, Meistersinger, like that's 5 hours long, right? So it takes a while
Take
to
a
learn.
nap before you go.
Right, take a nap, bring a lunch. But it takes a while to learn those roles. Those are large roles, and it takes stamina. And you can't build it overnight, and these kids can't learn how to do it overnight. So they have to start.
I've always
Make a
said
start.
the way that you learn to sing high notes is sing high notes.
Yes.
I mean, you have to have a method for how to do it, but don't let it go. You've got to keep that thing oiled and working, and the cylinders firing. If you don't sing every day, or maybe six days a week, it's, you know, people will start to notice. You know, you start to notice, your teacher starts to notice, and then God forbid the public starts to notice. So yeah.
You're like an athlete in a way. You have to keep in shape. You have to keep that training going all the time, and especially with big voices.
And you have to look after your girlish figure.
That's right. Good. Well, let's hear
Layla.
this next singer. And this is Layla Curvis. And she is singing, I just got to see which one, Divinité du Styx.
Divinité du Styx.
Matthew Gaskin, and he is going to sing Winterstürme from Walküre.
Winterstürme wiegen den Wonnemond, in mildem Lichte leuchtet der Lenz. Auf linden Lüften leicht und lieblich, wunderwebend sie bewegt. Durch Wald und Auen weht sein Atem, weit geöffnet lag sein Hauch. Auch selge Vöglein sangen süß ertönt, holde Düfte haucht aus. Seinem warmen Blut entblühen wonnige Blumen, Keim und Sprossen springt seine Kraft. Mit zarter Waffensilbe zwingt die Welt, Wind und Sturm wiegen der starken Wehr. Wohl musste den Tapfern streiken die strenge Tiere aufweichen, die trotzig und starr uns trennte von ihm. Zu seiner Schwester schwang sie her, die Liebe lockte den Lenz in unseren Busen, barg sie sich tief, nun lag sie seilig in Licht. Die bräutliche Schwester verleihte der Bruder, zertrümmert ließ, was je sie getrennt. Jauchzend gerüßt sich das junge Paar vereint. Sie lebe und Lenz.
Am I on? I don't know why he reminds me of the guy from Flight of the Conchords. Okay, maybe you don't know who the Flight of the Conchords are, but anyway, he kind of reminds me. That song, as I was introduced it as, it's like one of the most beautiful love songs that Wagner wrote. It's just gorgeous. But I don't know if you know this, but it's to his twin sister, who he will get pregnant in a few minutes. And anyway, I just love Wagner because there's always a twist in the middle of it all. All right, now, where should we go? Have you got any...
Well, before our next singer, I think one of the frustrations for larger voices is having to wait to do what they're meant to do. So how did you deal with that?
I was always able to work at one thing or another, and people would give me sort of enough work to kind of keep house and home together. I went to Montreal after I was at UBC, and I worked there, and I 2 years in professional choir here, 2 years in professional choir there. I sang as a professional choir member in a church. I sang in a synagogue choir. That was kind of fun. Mr. Mennonite boy. So I was always able to kind of get dribs and drabs in. It was really my wife who made the solid income, which was teaching. And that's what I recommend. Get your wife to do it for you, or a partner, you know. And it was kind of difficult, and I went through a lot of self-examination, trying to figure out whether I could continue doing this. I remember once I had sung a concert, sort of a fundraising concert with Louis Quilico, very famous Canadian baritone, in Montreal. It was raising funds, it was a charity thing, and I made a few bucks out of it, but it was glorious. I got to stay in a great hotel. I got to sing with all these fabulous people who were so much further ahead than me. In Montreal, it was heaven. And Monday morning on the way home, I remember scanning the pages thinking, what else could I do? And look through the help wanted ads, because it just, like, there was nothing else on the horizon. And so I phoned it, and I got home noon on Monday. I phoned my friend, and I said, Larry, I need work. I've got to pay the rent. And he said, man, I got work for you, but it's kind of beneath you. I said, there's nothing. There's no work beneath anybody. If it keeps your family together and food on the table, that's what you've got to do. Okay, he said. Tomorrow morning, 7:30, such and such an address, boots and gloves. I came, and it was a house that had been torched. So the fire started in the kitchen, and I worked all day. My job was to rip off the plaster off the lath. And at the end of the day, we had to the three of us working had to grab this refrigerator and sort of hump it out to the, whatever you call that, the skip, the dumpster. And that's when Larry drives up in his nice Cadillac, in his gray slacks and, nice pressed shirt and tie. And all the three of us were all just trying to keep it together. We were ready to hurl, all three of us. And he said, well, Ben, that's what I tell you. And I said, Larry, as God is my witness, I am going to work so hard that I will never have to do this again. Thank you for letting me do it. Maybe it's time to hear somebody else sing.
Well, I remember you and I doing a Beethoven Ninth in Winnipeg.
Oh, right.
And it was early
That was
on.
you? No.
Yes, that was me. Little old me. And the next thing I know, about maybe 4 to 6 months later, I read in Opera Canada, Ben Heppner, I think it was Meistersinger you did in Australia, or something like
Ariadne.
that. Ariadne, right. And I thought, and then it was just one thing right after the other. So what happened there in that made it click finally?
Well, I found a teacher and a coach. To me, I think that coaching maybe is more important, dare I even say this, than teaching, because I kind of knew how to sing. I just needed to be kind of shown how to make it happen. So that was teaching too, but also the stylistic approach to how you did it. And so my coach was actually married to my teacher, and I would do 2-hour sessions because I found them more effective. So first 20 minutes is kind of getting everything working. And then I had about an hour of really great work. And then probably about the next, 30 minutes of kind of diminishing returns. It was still good, but maybe not as good as that hour had been. And then I would walk out of the studio and I would immediately sit down because I was so exhausted, I wouldn't even let myself drive yet. And it was just, she was the one who helped me put the rubber on the road in a way that it was different than a teacher almost. And so I'm a big believer in coaching, and I know that this is something that you understand entirely, and once we can get the budgets and people supporting, I know that this is something you're working on.
Yeah, and each individual opera has its own specialized style,
Yeah.
and the languages, and then each language carries its own challenges with how you sing it vocally and helpfully, and somehow negotiate those incredible lines that you have to sing.
Or in Czech.
Or in
you love
Czech.
this. This is the word. V-S-R-D-S, then an I. Wysorodzi. On a high B flat. On a high B flat. No vowel. Anyway.
Just lots
You
of
have to have somebody help you
consonants.
there with that.
Well, we're so lucky because we have Milena Janda, our Czech coach, who is here, and she helps our students with the Czech. But it is like there's 5 consonants before you hit a vowel, or no vowel at all in the word. So it's scary.
You don't sing them.
Yeah, but they scare you when you look at
I'm
them.
sorry. Buy a vowel.
You just have to. We buy our own vowels in those languages, right?
It's a beautiful language, actually. I know 2 words. This is the very, very awkward words to know. I mean, I don't know chlapchok, like a baby, and zhizhali, which is worms, right? Zhizhali. Yes. It's because I sang an opera that had the word worms in it. I don't know. Anyway, I wish you'd been there where it would have gone way better.
But I've heard, Ben, that your recording of the Prince in Rusalka is the most precise recording of the Czech.
That's because I had somebody who beat me with a stick. No, I've always had, I don't know, some reason that's worked for me. I did Latsa and Jenůfa. Well, no, Rusalka. I did it on the stage.
On the stage of the old
The only
Odd.
opera I ever did. And yeah, it was in English, and a couple of lines I remember kind of embarrassed me. And of course, those are the ones that I said more precisely than the rest of them. But I had the opportunity to sing it here, and the next time I did it was in Czech in Philadelphia, and then I've done it in the Met, and I'm trying to think, I've done it elsewhere too, Seattle. So it was a great piece, and recorded it with Renee Fleming.
And we go to the Czech Republic every year, and they're always saying to us, the Czechs are saying, well, the best one is Ben Heppner. His Czech is the best, right?
Whoa.
So
That's money
I just
well
wanted
spent.
to
May
deliver.
I say money well spent.
And of course, when we talk about Judy, they'll always talk about how Judy went over and sang in Jenůfa, wasn't it? And they all started to talk to her in Czech because her Czech was so good. And of course, that's Milena's influence. But they all talked to her in Czech, and she said, I'm sorry, I don't speak it, I just sing it, right?
Well, I have a story. So we recorded, and then afterwards we had this big kind of a press deal at a castle, right? It was right up the hill from Dvorak's birth home. I've forgotten the name of the family that now owns it again. What's that?
The castle is Nella Ozebes.
Exactly.
Nella Hosedas.
Whatever she said. So the press were a little bit concerned that they had all these foreign singers singing in their language. They were wondering how it was going to work. And so the press officer for the record company wanted to bring up, because a couple of us had Czech roots. And so Renee Fleming, oh yes, my grandmother was born here. Oh, that was interesting. Dolores Zajic, I mean, I think her heritage is from that very same area. The bass, Franz Havlata, I think is a Czech name, although I have to say, you could give him some lessons. Yeah, he was the one who'd struggled more than the rest of us. Anyway, Mr. Heppner, do you have any connection with the Czech people? And I said, unfortunately, yes. And they looked at me and I said, let me explain. We Canadians love our hockey. And just 3 months ago, the Czech national team beat us really badly. And I'm very unhappy about that. So we were friends again. Anyway, I think it's time to hear somebody else. I think Laura is ready to go.
Yes. Okay. So here's Laura Miller, and she's going to sing Ariadne's aria, and she will be doing Ariadne in June with us when we produce that. The other thing that we need to recognize about these operas too is that they were written for opera houses that were much smaller than what we have our singers perform in. So like a 2,500, 3,000 seat opera house for Europe is almost unheard of.
Yeah, huge.
And a big one would be maybe 1,200 or 1,500,
18 maybe,
18 max, right? So that's a huge difference because you're also getting over that orchestra, right? And of course in Bayreuth, the orchestra pit is really nice because it's covered over, which is great, right? And for the audience, for the Wagnerian operas, which tend to be longer, you have hour pauses in between, and you can go and discuss the opera as Wagner wanted you to. But we tend to put people through, the audience and the singers, through a 3 to 5 hour marathon.
Without
right?
any significant
Without
breaks in between.
any significant breaks. So it's hard for young singers to find out how to do that.
I was talking about stamina. Is somebody asked about, I don't know how it came up, attention span. You know, how do you keep your attention span for all that period of time? And I said, well, I'm in a difficult position because I may have a Wagnerian-sized voice, but I only have about a 5-minute attention span, and that's a problem. And they said, well, these guys take you seriously. That's what kills me. And so they said, oh, then how is it possible to sing a role like, Meistersinger or Tristan? It's 5 hours of in the evening. And I said, well, I sing the first 5 minutes, and then I sing the next 5 minutes. And before long, you've sung the entire opera. But that's right. There's I know Bayreuth would start at probably 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and then have probably an hour. You can have dinner in between.
I know, it's great. As an audience member, I really like that because you get to hear beautiful music, then you go out and have dinner.
As a singer,
but
though,
as a singer, it's not so great.
It's hard. Like, for example, I always wanted particularly the second intermission in Tristan. Tristan is a big thing for a tenor to sing, well, tenor and the soprano. And I wanted a shorter break between acts 2 and 3, because if it was too long, my voice would say, oh, I'm done, I guess. And it would just stop working. It would sort of just kind of go to sleep. And that's what you don't want, because you don't actually want to sound like you're unconscious when the opera starts, or be unconscious rather than sound. So there are challenges that you've got to overcome.
We singers sometimes say, like, what do you eat between acts, or do you eat in a long opera, right? And a lot of people like bananas because there's nothing that's going to choke you or anything. And so I always used to call them 2 bananas or 3 banana operas, right? And I would think Tristan would be a 5 banana opera, actually.
Well, what I found was, do you eat? Of course you do. How can you get through to the end? You have, I would have some tea and maybe some cheese and crackers and something to just, give you some protein and a bit of a sugar lift, because the Act 2 is the big bear. Everybody talks about Act 3. It's actually Act 2, and you need to bring yourself back from that, and before you can actually sing Act 3. So, yeah, you have to eat 2 hours in advance, and it was a bit of a tricky thing.
Right.
So there are people I know who have, there's one soprano I know who has soup at lunch, and that's it.
Oh my God.
I don't know how she did it.
I don't know how she did it either. I'd always have to have steak and potatoes and vegetables and the whole works. What about you, Judy? She doesn't eat anything. That's why you see the difference between my figure and her figure, right? It's not fair. These tall, lean mezzos, right? So we're going to hear another singer.
This is our final singer.
Yes,
I think it is Jason
yes. Klippenstein.
We've been trying to figure out whether we're related, because your mother was the last name Brown? Your grandmothers. Okay, so it'll be a little harder to. It takes Mennonites 5 minutes to get acquainted and 10 to be related. So, might take 12 minutes, but we do it for sure. Anyway, Jason.
But there's one thing I do want to say, and you people will be able to testify. You never want to sit beside a singer or a singing teacher in a concert, right? Because there's Ben and I breathing with everybody. And Judy is too, I can tell. So you're always sitting beside them and they're like... It's quite distracting. We apologize.
Yes.
You've got the worst seats in the house. Sorry about that. So we have Jason Klippenstein now, and he is a doctoral student, and he's doing very well, progressing very well, though I may have to fail him for a few years because he's just too darn good to graduate. But he's going to sing Onegin in Eugene Onegin in February. So he's going to sing his aria for you now.
Когда бежишь домашним кругом, я граничить захотел. Когда мне бит отцом-супругом, приятный жребий повелел. Верно, кроме вас одной невесты не искал иной. Но я не создан для блаженства, ибо чужда душа моя. Напрасны ваши совершенства, их недостоин воссея. А верьте, совесть там порукой, супружество нам будет мукой. Я сколько не любил и вас, привыкнув, разлюбил тот час. Судите ж ли, какие розы нам заготовили мене. Или, может быть, намного нет. Нет сами года, нет возврата, аж нет возврата, не обновью души моей. Я вас люблю любовью брата, или, может быть, еще сильнее, или, может быть, послушай, чье без гнева, смени не разгладая дева. Мечтами, лёгкие мечты.
I want to do two things, and that is thank Richard Epp, first
Exactly
of
what I
all,
wanted to do
to
too.
say, for all his playing. And I also want to thank Sonia Wall, who arranged for the Fazioli piano here, and I'd like to thank the Fazioli firm for donating this piano for today's performance. This is so wonderful to have such a great instrument.
Amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And while I'm thanking people, I thank you, Philippe, for having us here and for your support of this initiative. It's just so wonderful to have great international stars right here with us and to see a little bit more of the inner workings of what these people do. There's not a lot of research that's been done in how we do what we do. And you know, sometimes we go a long time and we think, oh my God, was I doing that?
Yeah.
And so it's kind of fun
I
to
wanted to
have
thank you
that.
for mentioning those who accompany and coach. And because my wife was an accompanist, and I don't know if she was a coach, but she accompanied, and my daughter also. So I'm very sensitive that we really need you guys. Thank you so much, Richard, for doing such a fantastic job. And those people who are pianists should also think it's a wonderful way to earn your living.
Yes, that's for sure. And of course, it's a different thing doing opera than art song in a way, in accompanying the singer, but there are many similarities of it too. And of course, just like the singer, they have to contend with the conductor when they're playing. And we have to contend with conductors as well. And so that also makes our lives interesting in many ways, and theirs too. Any words of wisdom for these young singers with these big voices? I feel personally very blessed to have these big voices, and it's unusual.
A great bunch of singers, very, very impressive, you guys. Thank you, everyone.
Can you all come out? Come out, come out, come out. Good. So, any words of wisdom, Ben?
Now go get them, kids. I say.
Patience, and then go get them.
Patience. Remind me of that picture of there's a vulture and he's just looking. There's nothing to eat, and he says, "Patience. Forget that. I'm going to go kill something." So go out there and kill something.
Right. Thank you all for today, and Ben, thank you so much for
welcome.
taking
Thank
the time.
you.
If any of you want to come, we have another master class with the non-huge voices, with the other voices in the school from 1 to 3 on the 3rd of October, and that will be in room 100 in the Old Odd, and you're most welcome to come along, and if you all come along, we'll just move it upstairs to the Old Odd. So just feel free to come along between 1 and 3 on the 3rd of October, and you'll hear a whole different complement of singers. And we now have a reception for you, thanks to the Wall Institute. And there is a cash bar open, and we would just love to have you stay and mingle with the singers, maybe speak to Ben, and have a great time. And thank you all for coming. We, as I say, we have a symposium in November, the first week, and we will have the console, and many of these people are in the console. And also, we will have another singer behind the song event on the 1st of April with Sondra Radwanovsky. And she, of course, is one of the great sopranos right now in the world, and we're just so thrilled to have her coming on April 1st. So we've got a lot of wonderful people coming. So keep tuned, and thank you all for coming today.